Hello, and welcome to the Romancing in Paris podcast. I'm your host, Lily Heise. In this podcast, we'll be traveling around the city as I pick out my top romantic spots per arrondissement. You don't have to visit these places only as a couple. Exploring them can be the expression of your own love of Paris. Are you ready to get romancing in Paris? In this latest episode of Romancing in Paris, we continue our easterly path from the 10th arrondissement over into the 11th, one situated just outside the Charles V city walls and in the shadow of the formidable Bastille fortress. The working-class area is also one with a revolutionary spirit, which I will be telling you more about. The area carries on being revolutionary today, that is, in the form of inventive restaurants, modern cafes, and creative design shops. Similar to the 10th, the 11th is more hip than romantic. However, it does have some lovely gems, a variety of which we will be discussing in this episode. A specific type of place that is intrinsically linked to the area's history. Grab your sherry. We're going to the passage Lhomme. The 11th district occupies part of what was once the Faubourg Saint-Antoine, now divided between the 11th and 12th districts by the long Rue du Faubourg Saint-Antoine. In French, the word faubourg means suburb, like we've seen in previous episodes of the podcast when we touched on the Faubourg Saint-Germain and the Faubourg Saint-Honoré. In the Middle Ages, the land was owned by the Saint-Antoine-des-Champs Abbey, or Saint-Antoine of the Fields, which sprawled around this area. Later, this became the Hôpital Saint-Antoine, a hospital which still exists today. The district flourished during the reign of Louis XIV, when the Sun King made it a tax-free zone for furniture makers and other craftsmen in order to supply Versailles with its sumptuous furnishings. It was not surprising that this working-class district became a hotbed of revolutionaries. And not just one revolution. The first revolt the area was involved in was that of La Fronde in July 1652, an aristocratic power struggle during Louis XIV's youth. The area also fostered a lesser-known mini-revolution in May 1750, a revolt against King Louis XV. In the lead-up to the main French Revolution, there were troubles brewing here, which blew up with an incident which took place in April 1789, and then, of course, the storming of the Bastille on the night of July 13th to 14th of 1789. During the Revolutionary era, the district's gateway entrance into Paris was renamed Faubourg de Gloire, or the Glory Suburb. Interestingly, the word glory reappears in 1830 as the name of the revolts which overthrew King Charles X, Les Trois Glorieuses, or the Three Glorious Days. Many of the incidences of that revolution happened in this area, and its victims are commemorated by the July column which now stands in Place de la Bastille. Lastly, the area was the theatre of the 1832 rebellion, an uprising in Paris against the rule of King Louis Philippe. fueled by economic hardship and a particularly nasty cholera epidemic, which is vividly described in Victor Hugo's legendary book Les Miserables. Oh, those troublesome Saint-Antoinians! So, when you're visiting the area, you have to imagine revolutionary scenes and barricades, although liberty leading the people might be a bit of a stretch. All these revolutionaries could easily hide out in the area's many passageways, which developed from when Louis XIV made the area a tax-free zone. As the Industrial Revolution steamrolled through the 19th century, factories were added to the district's furniture makers and woodworkers. Remnants of these aspects of the area's history can still be found scattered throughout the district, especially on its many cobbled passageways. Differing from the covered passageways of the Upper District, which were specifically designed with shopping in mind, like the Galerie Vivienne which we visited in episode 2 of the podcast, the ones of the 11th and 12th were firmly artisanal and industrial, as well as being open air. The most charming of the area's passageways is likely the Cour d'Amois, found just off of Place de la Bastille. As that passageway is a little better known, I wanted to take you further into the district, to one which better illustrates the history of these passageways, and one with more hidden romantic allure. As one walks up Rue de Charonne, lined with its bustling cafes, restaurants, and bars, one hardly notices the opening at number 26. But once you've walked under the nondescript entrance, you've entered the enchanting oasis of the Passage Lhomme. Note, the name isn't Lhomme, L'Homme, which would make it the passageway of man, but instead it's all one word, Lhomme, which was actually the last name of the founder of the passageway, and that of a municipality in the Sarthe department of the Loire. The 122-meter-long lane was built in 1852, and one of the things that is nice about this passageway is that, although it has lost some of its original woodworking shops, it still has some traditional buildings and businesses, and has also retained its 19th century ambiance. One of the most distinct buildings you'll notice as you walk down the tranquil, vine-laden lane is the rusty red brick Miroterie Remlinger, a former sawmill turned mirror manufacturer dating back to 1886, but which ceased its operations in 2006. Check out its glass roof, which was designed by Gustave Eiffel's company, and the large smokestack which juts above the building, which seems right out of Les Miserables. Another historic building in the passageway is La Société Hollande, a varnish company which opened in 1912 and is still run by the same family, although today it specializes in restoring antique furniture for prestigious historic buildings, like the Senate or the President's home at the Élysée Palace. The passageway has a number of cool old signs, and the design atelier and production companies which now call it home do keep up the lane's appeal. We'll be right back with Romancing in Paris after a word from our sponsors. And now,
back to Romancing in Paris.
It's a lovely place to linger and have a quiet lover's moment of oh-la-laing while strolling in eastern Paris. You can carry on your explorations of the area's historic passageways by visiting those off of Rue du Faubourg Saint-Antoine, like the Passage de Chantier and the Cour des Chadocs, where furniture shops can still be found. Further along the street, you can find a charming ambiance in the Passage Saint-Bernard and the Passage de la Main d'Or, or the Golden Hand passageway, which is home to the fun local bar and bistro à l'Ami Pierre. If you don't stop in there, the district has a great number of modern bars and restaurants where you can finish off your romantic outing. At some point, either before or after visiting these other passages, you might want to pop into La Cour des Mois. That way you can compare it with the more authentic passageways. Thank you for listening to this latest edition of Romancing in Paris. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe. That way you won't miss the next one. Ratings or reviews also get a big je t'aime from me. If you would like to discover more romantic places in the district, see my website Je t'aime me neither, which has my guides for the top romantic spots per arrondissement. This podcast was produced by Paris Underground Radio. Check out their website if you're interested in listening to more great podcasts on Paris, including my other podcast, Paris Cachet, which explores even more lesser-known and hidden places in the city. In the meantime, happy romancing in Paris.